Hey y'all, so I am back with another tutorial. It has been a super long time since I did one, but today I want y'all to watch me create this sweetheart bodice. Now real quick before we get started, I should let y'all know we are only going to focus on the outside of the drape, this part right here, not the whole thing, because honestly that would just take too long to make, or at least too long to show y'all how to do in a little video. So yeah, now to get started, we are going to underline our fabric to our netting. If you don't know what it means to underline something, it's basically when you lay your fabric on top of another piece of fabric and you sew them together around the edges. So I took my fabric and laid it on top of the netting and I sewed it all around the edges completely. So yeah, that's what it should look like. And then after that, we are going to cut off any netting that's like going over the borders or the edges of our fabric. Okay, so next, after that's cut, you want to take the longest edge of your big old piece of fabric that we just underlined, and you want to basically hand sew a basting stitch through that. What we're about to do is gather that whole long side of the fabric, and before you ask, or before the question even comes up, well, why can't I just gather on my sewing machine? From my experience, whenever I've tried to like gather fabric on the sewing machine that's underlined with netting, it just doesn't work out. So I'm doing it by hand. So as you can see, I'm just going real simple, up and down, up and down, up and down with the needle and thread. But I am basting that, and as you can see, like, I'm starting to pull the thread as I create that stitch along the edge, and that's creating that gathered effect. So yeah, you want to do that along the whole entire edge. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I did it along the whole entire edge. I think I did it like through half of that piece of fabric. So scratch that. You want to baste it through half of that piece of half of your fabric, and then you want to take it to the mannequin and see if you basted enough of that. Or why am I saying basted? Gathered. You want to take it to the mannequin and see if you gathered enough of it. So now what you can see that I'm doing, you can see that I am pinning the fabric, the gathered side, on the outside of my little heart shaped pattern here. So I am only going to pin up until the point of the heart. So I'm starting at the top, and you can choose where you want that to start at, but I'm starting at the top, like a little bit above that center bust seam, and I'm pinning all the way down to the point. Once you get that pinned and get all of that situated, you can now start to play with the drape and just see how you feel about it. So let's see. And the verdict is, yeah, that is freaking beautiful. Period. Get into it. Period. Okay, but no, for real. So now I want to continue to create this shape. Right now I'm like getting the idea of what this pattern for this drape is about to look like. So yeah, I'm going to take the back half of the fabric and just start pinning and like folding the fabric in half and creating that shape, creating that outside curve, however I want that to look. So I don't want mine to all be like one size. So the top of this drape is going to be bigger, and the bottom of the drape is going to come down to like a smaller point almost. I want it to look like a heart. So the top of a heart is big, the bottom is small, but that's what we are going for. Alright, so now you want to get some pens, some paper, and measuring tape, and you want to measure how long does the outside of this heart need to be, or basically the side that the drape is going along, how long does that need to be. Then you want to measure how wide is the top of the drape, right? Then you want to measure how wide is the center, the middle part of the drape, and you want to measure how many inches are from the top of the drape to the center of the drape, still going along that inside edge. Then you want to also measure how short should the bottom of the drape be where the point is. So I know that was a lot, but yeah. So now the numbers that I just wrote down, I'm about to basically mark those numbers onto the drape. So I think for the top of my drape, the full width that I wanted it to be was like 18 inches or something along those lines. Oh wait, actually no, looking at the camera, it looks like it was in the 20s. Let's say it was like 26. So half of that would be 13, right? So I would measure 26 inches along the top edge. Then I would measure, okay, where's the center of my drape? I want that to be, let's just say 18 inches. Oh, look, it looked like 22. Okay, I want that to be 22 inches. Half of that is 11. So I know that that's like 11 inches is the center of that drape. And then I would measure the bottom. I know I want that to be 8 inches long, like once it's folded. So that means it needs to be double, which is 16 inches long at the bottom. And so I hope that makes sense how I measured and marked it. But however wide you want the drape to be once it's folded, you will basically double that, and you want to mark that all along your drape. So again, just to reiterate, to make sure y'all got it, the top of my drape, I want that to be 13 inches wide. The center of the drape, I want that to be 11 inches wide. And the bottom of the drape, I want that to be 8 inches wide. So I had to double those numbers, then mark it onto the fabric. So now what I'm about to do, where I put those markings, and by the way, I marked those numbers. I marked those on the pattern with pins. Now I'm going to do another gathering stitch by creating a base stitch along those pins, along those markings that I just created. So of course, just like we did the other side, as I do this stitch, I'm going to gather it more and more and more. Oop, somebody's alarm going off. But yeah, I'm going to gather more and more and more until I get to the end. So now we go back to the mannequin. Again, we pin the inside edge to our heart-shaped pattern first. And then we go back and we pin the outside edge to the mannequin. All right, so I'm just pinning from the top to the bottom, trying to just get it to fit to the dress form as best as possible, and just adjusting anything that I feel like needs to be improved or just needs to look better. So this is giving me an idea of what the drape is going to look like once it's done. And I'm definitely loving it so far. Like, come on, get into it, okay? Okay. So now I'm going to cut all of that extra fabric on the outside of that second stitch line we created. But I don't want to cut too much, so I'm not even going to cut like right next to the thread. I'm going to cut like 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from that stitch line, because I feel like it's better to cut too much than to not cut enough. So when I say that, I mean cut enough to leave like more fabric left over than to cut right next to the line and it not be enough. Like, you need more space. So yeah, now what we want to do is basically underline this pattern piece again, but this time we're underlining along that new edge that we just cut. All right, so yeah, we're going to do that. I'm not exactly going right along that edge, because if I feel like it's gonna make my pattern piece look really weirdly shaped. Like, see all of that extra stuff at the top, that doesn't need to be there, so I'm gonna go back and cut that off. So now we have our entire pattern piece. This is what it should look like. I know you can't see the whole thing, but you get the idea. We have our whole pattern piece now. So now we're about to cut out the other half of our drape and cut out the lining. So now we're about to create a pattern for the other side. So I'm about to pull that whole like basting gathering stitch that we have like on the inside, the inner curve of the drape. We're about to pull all of that out, right? Once that's pulled out, we are going to lay that with right sides facing each other. Yeah, that's right. We're going to lay that pattern piece out on our taffeta, and then we're going to cut out the other side. So now I should have a right side and a left side, and then we're going to go through the whole process again of underlining the netting to our new pattern piece. All right, so when you just cut out that piece of fabric, you should have cut out the netting and also the taffeta at the same time. But now I'm going to pin the pattern piece to our lining, and we're going to cut out 2 layers of lining. Okay, so one of the main things that we need to add to this for the drape to keep it structured is we need to add basically stem wire to it. So we're going to use some bias tape, and we're going to sew strips of bias tape along the top, the middle, and the bottom of our lining pattern piece. And then once we sew that to our pattern piece, then we're going to feed some wire through it. When you sew the bias tape onto the pattern piece, you want to sew right along the edge of the right and left side of the bias tape. So the stem wire is pretty short. So for the first two rows, you're probably going to have to use like two pieces of stem wire instead of just one. But you want to make sure that the stem wire does not go all the way to the edge of the pattern piece. You want to have about like an inch or so of space on both ends of the pattern piece, like where the wire does not go into. Now with right sides together, we are going to pin our lining to the outside fabric, and then we're going to sew along the top edge, so the widest edge of our pattern piece. So once we sew that top edge together, we want to go ahead and basically case in those wires that we inserted into our bias tape. So I'm basically just doing a back stitch along the ends of our bias tape. You don't really need to sew down the whole entire pattern piece, but just on the edges of our pattern piece, you want to do a back stitch. And then once you do that, we'll go back and close up our sides of our pattern piece. With wrong sides together, you want to pin the left and the right edge of your pattern piece, and then you want to do another top stitch, or you can even say like understitch the two sides together. But yeah. After you sew those sides together, you want to go ahead and basically do a gathering stitch on the left and right side of the pattern piece again. And this is what you should have. Super cute, super cute. But now we're going to take these two pieces, and then we're going to pin them to our little heart-shaped pattern pieces. As you can see, I added a little more draping detail to it, but we're not going to get into all of that. But now I'm about to sew this together on my machine. I actually think what I ended up doing was hand sewing it together first, and then after I hand sewed it together, then I went ahead and then sewed it to the bodice. This is what it should look like once you have it sewn together. Yeah, this is what it's giving. There were like a few parts where my gathering stitch thread kind of popped out, so you want to go back and like remove any of that if that was an issue for you. All right, so we're getting close to the end. The next thing I'm going to do is attach my base to the drape. So I'm pinning my bodice to the mannequin, and now I have my base here. It's basically shaped like the outside of a heart, but now I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to hand sew this to my bodice. So once you finish hand sewing that in place, you want to go ahead and just sew over that hand stitch you just did. You want to sew over that with your machine. Now it may be a little tough just because you have like all of this fabric like bunched up, but if you take your time and maybe even use like a thicker needle, I'm sure it'll be fine. But now I have my base sewn to my bodice. Now I can start to do the placement and the positioning for the bottom half of my drape. And look at this. It is coming together, y'all. Okay, like look at it. So yeah, you want to just pin this however you see fit, whatever your heart desires. You want to pin this in place, and then once you're done pinning the shape of your drape, you want to go ahead and actually hand sew this to the bodice. So this is me hand sewing it. All right. You want to hand sew around the entire edge, okay? And then once this is done, I'm actually gonna add the lining to it. Now, this video doesn't show the lining because, again, I just wanted to show y'all, you know, how I created that outside drape. So this is actually the end of the video. But I hope y'all enjoyed this tutorial. I don't do voiceovers a whole lot, so if y'all like this, let me know in the comments. If y'all want to see more of these, again, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thank you for watching my video. So this is our end result, y'all. Super cute. I wanted to let y'all know, if you love this video, or even if you just love couture, you love draping, you love high fashion, definitely join my free Facebook community by clicking the link in my bio. Thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye, y'all.